Welcome into a brand new edition of the Sports Hub Patriots podcast. Alex Barth with you from 98.5thesportshub.com. We are joined today by Andrew Callahan of the Boston Herald to look ahead to the Patriots Week 2 matchup with the Seattle Seahawks. Andrew, thanks for joining us today.
You got it. It feels good to be, I don't know if I can say teammates. Maybe I'm on the 98.5 practice squad doing Toucher and Hardy Tuesday mornings. It's a bummer to be teammates or practice squad with Matt Doloff, but I'm happy to be with you here, Alex, on the show.
I think we can call it teammates. You got one of the key cards that gets in the building, right? I think if you have that,
I
you're on the team.
I do. It's a very nice perk. Been doing NBC for almost 4 years. No key card there. So it's nice to be treated as, someone who belongs.
Not you don't have to call up ahead and be like, come get the door. I'm here.
Government ID every time I walk, which is fine. I feel like I have a budding friendship with the security guard at NBC. I've been seeing a lot of them. They have great opportunities. They're very good to me there. But the key card has 98.5 going up my side hustle, side job rankings. You guys have been great.
So again, you can hear Andrew in the mornings on Toucher and Hardy Tuesdays, right?
Yeah, Tuesdays 8 to 9.
So check that out, and he'll have a recap of this game once it's played. But we'll get to the game now, looking ahead at it. And I guess I want to start here, Andrew. Of course, you had a lot of people saying going into Week 1, Patriots can't win. They don't have the talent. They're not on the level. The Bengals are among the best teams in the AFC. The Patriots win, and then suddenly we're hearing, oh, that Bengals team really isn't that good. And look, there are some extenuating circumstances there. They didn't have T. Higgins. Jamar Chase hadn't practiced all summer. I get that. But, I don't know if the Bengals are the class of the AFC or the class of the NFL, but I think that's a decent football team. As I look at this matchup, I don't know, top to bottom on the roster, I feel like the Seahawks are a lesser team. Now, maybe the matchups aren't as favorable to the Patriots as they were with Cincinnati, but how would you stack the Seahawks up as a whole against the Cincinnati team the Patriots just faced?
I think you hit on the key word there, and it's the matchup part of this. Like, I think if you are looking at this in a very kind of shallow level one view of a football game, coach and quarterback, you look Joe Burrow to Geno Smith is a downgrade. Zach Taylor has at least been to a Super Bowl. Mike McDonald's coaching his second game, downgrade. But when you look at the defensive line for the Seahawks, that's a problem for the Patriots. So the offensive line outperformed expectations, don't get me wrong, but running at Leonard Williams is very different than running at Bengals backups, which they had in the middle between Trey Hendrickson, obviously a good player, and Sam Hubbard. So to me, this we're going to run the ball down your throat kind of approach, which the Bengals knew couldn't stop, is going to be different with the Seahawks. So Cincinnati was also a bottom 5 running defense by any metric that was worth looking at last year. They brought back most of the roster except for DJ Reader. And so the Patriots, of course, were going to run the ball, even if that wasn't their only recourse. On offense for Seattle, they're also much more explosive. And, again, Joe Burrow, great quarterback. Cincinnati had the fewest explosive plays in Week 1. They were among the bottom 10 teams last year in explosive plays. While DK Metcalf, even though Tyler Lockett's like 36, and then you throw Jackson Smith and Jigba in there, all of these guys can go for 20-plus yards anytime they touch the ball. So it's not a matter of, the Patriots don't have the horses in the secondary. It's just a thinner margin for error when you knew that aside from Jamar Chase in Cincinnati, no one was going to hurt you.
All right, let's start. You touched on, I think, the big points there. I want to start with that Seahawks defensive line because it's really an impressive group. You mentioned Leonard Williams. They have Jonathan Hankins, Jaron Reed as well. And Byron Murphy, their first-round pick, was one of the breakout rookies around the NFL last week. He had a really good game. Patriots offensive line last week, it's crazy. We're sitting here saying they exceeded expectations. Ramondre Stevenson had to get 118 of his 120 yards after contact. Jacoby Brissett faced the highest pressure rate of any quarterback in football. Yet I don't think you're wrong. I've said this too, sitting here saying, yeah, it could have been worse. Like, it went better than I thought it would. So obviously a tougher test this week. To me, the big adjustment is what happens at left tackle. We saw the first practice of the week earlier today. It looks like Vidarian Lowe might be ahead of Chuks Okorafor at this point. Is that change enough? What else do you need to see from this Patriots offensive line? Do they need to make any more changes this week, you think, going into the Seattle matchup?
Well, I would say, Vidarian Lowe starting left tackle, obviously an upgrade over Chuks Okorafor, who the man gave up 3 pressures in 12 snaps, which is just a rate that I don't know if any of us performed like that at our jobs, we would last a day. Like whatever the equivalent is to 12 NFL snaps, like you're just gone. So that does help. The issue is you don't just get to carry over, though, that performance from Week 1, right? Like what we might have seen from Layden Robinson, who run block very well, clean sheets for Mike Onwenu and David Andrews in pass protection, while they also run block very well, might not happen again. That might have been in the upper range, the upper limit of Layden Robinson's performance as a rookie. We just don't know yet because it was one game. So to that point, Seattle's going to pose different problems, not only from a personnel standpoint, but schematically. when you break down, and this is a coverage thing, but we'll get to the front in a
Yeah.
second, they were in cover 1, cover 2, cover 4, and cover 6 on at least 10 to 15% of their snaps. So they're spinning the dial a lot in a way that the Bengals, who, have a creative pressure team, but only blitz twice, they're going to hit buttons that the Patriots didn't have to deal with in week 1. So I think you need a better performance from the offensive line. Lowe being a left tackle will help, but they need to continue to be more aware and alert because of the 3 pressures that Layden Robinson gave up. I had 2 as mental errors. So that stuff can still happen, especially with rookies and a bad to iffy offensive line.
Do you think some of that too can come down to the offense as a whole just being a little more varied? And what I mean by that is they were running the ball well. Ramondre Stevenson was running the ball well in week 1, yet they only had 5 play action plays in there, and it kind of allowed that defense to stack the box. Obviously, it still worked for them against the Bengals, but Seattle, where they do some more multiple things, part of the reason you think, why doesn't every team spin the dial all the time? It's a lot mentally, and if you're giving them offensively a lot of things to look at, it can make it a little harder. Can the Patriots do more with their play calling, do you think, to help the offensive line against Seattle?
I do, but I think the play action point also highlights why the offensive line is a struggle, right? If you don't trust your offensive line to block, you can't call longer developing pass plays, which is not only just, you're talking 5-step drop concepts for the quarterback, but he's turning his back to the defense that's then spinning the dial. So if Jacoby Brissett's under center and he sees a too high structure, then he snaps the ball, turns his back, and they spin down to 1. That's taking longer for him to get through the read and make the decision and find the player, at which point he might already be under pressure looking for the open receiver. So what I would say is if they do want to kind of clear the picture for him and change the play calling as you suggest, I would go more empty, right? Which again, there's some risk in there, but Jacoby Brissett, and my partner at the Herald Duck Hide has a great piece coming out in this tomorrow, has gotten so much better at avoiding pressure and negative plays. So when he can see the whole defense and he understands I only have 5 blockers, but I'll know where the weak spot is and I'll throw it to Pop Douglas over here, KJ Osborne over there, that could help. That to me would be one of a few solutions, and maybe some more screens because we only saw 1 in Cincinnati.
So when you look at this matchup then and maybe how the Patriots will have to approach it, I know one thing maybe fans were a little disappointed of, even, and I used that word acknowledging, yes, they won the game, but there wasn't, no wide receiver broke out. It was a very level effort. Didn't have any guy have a big game. Is there anybody, you mentioned Pop Douglas, and he does seem like a guy that might be favored in a quick pass approach. Is there any wide receiver that's maybe poised to have more of a bigger game or take more advantage of this matchup against Seattle?
Yeah, well, first of all, if anyone is disappointed in the Patriots winning as 2-score underdogs for the first time in 8 years, you're in timeout. You need to go to the corner, you need to stare at the wall, and you need to think about what your priorities are. Because I don't know about you, Alex, but I looked and charted and watched, and I know you did this too, actually, every single snap of the last 2 seasons, the offensive disaster and dysfunction that was the New England Patriots at the end of the Belichick era. A win is a win, okay?
No, so look, I'm with you. Sorry to cut you off.
This way, but
no, I heard people using the term tomato can this week.
Oh my God.
We're back to tomato cans. 1 game into the Gerard Mayo era, when the sky was falling, we're now already back to tomato cans.
I'm sorry that your parlays didn't hit, or your prize picks, which I have on my podcast over Pass Interference, was blown. I was 0 for 2. Your fantasy team stunk, whatever. You should be happy to be 1-0. The Patriots haven't done this in 4 years. Now, to the point about the receivers, I would look at Pop Douglas, but it will depend on a personnel thing, right? Because we learned in this opener, when the Patriots want to play out of 2 tight end sets, which they did a lot, or otherwise just have 2 receivers on the field, he's not one of them, right? He's only in the slot, and that's how they're treating them. So I look at him. I look at KJ Osborne again, not from the standpoint of, I think he's a great receiver. But when you look at the total of targets, his 6 was more than double most of the other receivers, or at least double. And specifically, Brissett went to him in critical situations. So of those 6, 4 were on 3rd down, and another was in the red zone, meaning got to have situations. He's looking at KJ Osborne. I would love to say Jalen Polk. He only had 1 target. He got open a fair amount by some more advanced metrics, but this is not just how he's doing his job. It's what's the level of trust and faith that Jacoby Brissett has in him. I haven't seen that yet, so I'm going to stick with Pop, and I'm going to stick with KJ Osborne.
Well, along the same lines, too, not to totally, typecast guys, but that Z receiver role is so important in this offense, and that's the position Osborne plays. That's where they've had him pretty much throughout the summer. I think he very briefly got a little bit of time at X, but he's a Z, and Polk primarily projects as a Z. And if Polk did show some encouraging signs, but like you said, Osborne kind of seems like the guy Brissett trusts, it is tough to see how they get them going both at the same time, at least approaching things big picture the way they approach them against Cincinnati.
Yeah, and you mentioned the X, like that's been Tyquan Thornton. So it's him
Right.
and Osborne or Polk when they go to 12 personnel or 20. They didn't play any 21, but they're only with 2 receivers, right? And
Right.
Brissett talked today about the importance of getting the ball to Tyquan Thornton because of that 4-2 speed. I know that the staff really likes him, what that affords to take the top off the defense. And that was the first play they ran coming out of halftime. So we don't talk about halftime adjustments. That was number 1 on their list with the bullet is go deep to number 11. They didn't connect. But the point of those throws is not to connect in a way that's reliable or consistent, like a slant or Pop Douglas on a jerk right over the middle. It's that even if you throw it 5 times, you only hit 1. That 1 is either an explosive play or a touchdown. And so that I think they're going to chase. So again, Pop Douglas, unfortunately, is dependent on the personnel. I think they should just feature him more. He's their best option against man coverage. But Osborne has the trust. Thornton is what they're trying to force. And that's just kind of where you are yet for now, where I think Jalen Polk is taking a back seat.
So we kind of touched on this in some smaller pictures, but I guess just big picture, Alex Van Pelt has kind of talked about the offense is going to grow as the year goes on, which is what pretty much every team in the NFL does. You build up, you don't start with the full playbook week 1. But are there any adjustments, big picture adjustments you think fans should look for, you want to see into week 2? I know you mentioned Pop Douglas maybe being one, him getting more involved.
Yeah, I would say a higher first down pass rate. They ran the ball on their last 10 first down plays. And Cincinnati obviously got run over at the end. Like they got what they wanted.
Right.
5 yards, 9 yards, 3 yards, 9 more yards, game over. They win. But that conservative play calling initially led to three play drives to start the second half. So
Yeah.
it's cool that you eventually got what you wanted, but I don't think the process was as sound or as aggressive as it could have been. And again, we're talking about Jacoby Brissett. I had 44% under pressure. That's an issue. Other places said 48. There are a lot of things to consider here. But when you're trying to run the clock out by starting at the end of the third quarter, and then the other team scores, and in Seattle's case, has much more explosive players, that's inviting a kind of danger. So I think you could have, instead of kind of running the clock out at the end of the third quarter, knocked them out if you had gotten another touchdown and been a little bit more aggressive. There are safe throws there. Alex Van Pelt knows this, but we don't know a whole lot about him as a play caller, right? It's the first time he's done this since 2009. Right. Just pass a little bit more on first down.
So I interpreted that, and this goes back to something you mentioned earlier. That sequence at the end of at the beginning of the second half, which I hammered a lot coming away from that game, they really turned up the pressure on Brissett, the pass rush pressure at the end of the first half. And that almost felt like, to me, a response to the offensive line and the inability to protect the quarterback. They didn't want to put him in danger. They didn't want to put the ball in danger. And they tried to slow it down and kind of offset the pass rush by running aggressively. And that is something they're going to need to do at times. But I'm with you. I think it almost got to the point where they handcuffed themselves, and putting a little more trust in either the offensive line, or it may just have to be Jacoby Brissett's ability to handle pressure, I think is something that they're going to need to do moving forward.
Yeah, and that's why he's here, right? You're the adult in the room. David Andrews used those exact words on his own podcast. I wish I could shout it out now because it's like Quick Snap something.
It's Quick Snap podcast, I think, yeah.
But he, and I can share this now because he said it, like, and this is a little bit of a pivot. When I went out with him in June and wrote a story about this, we talked about Jacoby Brissett.
That was awesome, by the way.
Thank you. And he talked about, we've needed this veteran leadership, this steady hand. It's one thing to have that in the locker room, or just a guy who knows what to do and where to be and has a routine and can be an example. It's another to have that on Sundays in the huddle, steadying an offense. Cincinnati's coming back. Or if you are, as you're saying, facing pressure, not only just from players trying to hunt you down and sack you, but from a team trying to come back. And that, in addition to protecting the ball, has been massive. This offensive win was just about don't get in the defense's way. Something the Patriots tried for the last year, could never accomplish, went 4-13. So Brissett evading that actual pressure, just holding onto the ball. I think it's wise to protect him, but you also need to trust him to do those things, because that's why he's here. And for a guy with a 1.4% career interception rate, lowest in NFL history, he can do it. Just let him and trust him to do those things that you need to win, because it worked on Sunday.
All right, let's move on to the other side of the ball now. Facing the Seahawks offense, which, like you said, Andrew, they've got some playmakers. DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, you mentioned Jackson Smith and Jigba. I know Noah Fant, their tight end, is banged up, but I don't think he's been ruled out for this game yet. I still think there's a chance he's going to play. I'm fascinated by assuming we see it. And I just based off last week, the fact Gonzalez shadowed Jamar Chase as much as he did, or even if he doesn't shadow him, however many matchups we get between Christian Gonzalez and DK Metcalf, you look at the first 6 games this kid has had in the NFL, and this will be the 6th against Seattle, and the receivers he's faced, the murderer's row he's gone up against and passed every single test. And he had kind of a, I don't even want to call it a rough summer. I just think the expectations for him were so high that even just a solid performance kind of didn't reach them. And I think that's ultimately what happened.
Yeah, he was fine, right? Like
right.
Not many interceptions, pass deflections, whether it was the eye test or you're charting all the snaps and everything, gave up a couple catches in the preseason. Like he was fine.
Yeah, I think some people expect him to come out and be like prime Darrelle Revis, which again, he wasn't going to do that, but he comes out, has the performance he does against Chase in week 1. If he can do something similar against DK Metcalf, it's just so encouraging long-term, because for this defense to get to where we thought it was going to be with Christian Barmore, with Matthew Judon, they're going to need the sophomores, Gonzalez and Keon White, to step up. And you just feel so good about Christian Gonzalez, I think, if he has big performances against Metcalf and Chase. Now, can he do that is the question. Metcalf, maybe not as technically skilled as Chase, but just so physically dominant. That's why that's the most interesting part of this matchup to me, is it's a very different kind of receiver that Gonzalez is going up against.
It is. And it brings me back to their last matchup. You remember week 2, 2020, no one in the stadium, Sunday Night Football, probably the best game of that season. It was Gilmore and DK Metcalf, and DK Metcalf goes up and over and runs away from Steph Gilmore on a deep ball. And you're like, oh my God, what did he just do to the reigning defensive player of the year? And a guy that now in Christian Gonzalez looks a lot like in Steph Gilmore. So there will be instances where I think you just go, it was good defense and better offense, right? Like that old Mark Jackson cliche you're going to hear 5 times in the NBA Sunday broadcast when he was doing them. And so for Christian Gonzalez, I think it's about living to see another play. Like he gave up a couple catches to Jamar Chase, but we're all singing his praises because they only went for 14, 15 yards. He was a sound tackler. He fit within the overall scheme that confused Joe Burrow and played a ton of cover 2 and did that both on the outside and out of the slot, changing different assignments and alignments. So for me, it is a difficult matchup. Get your popcorn ready. I also think Jonathan Jones against Tyler Lockett's a much better matchup there too. So it just makes sense. Have them both shadow each of those guys and kind of roll the dice in the slot until Jackson Smith and Jigba really makes you pay, because those two are going to be the players that take this offense however far it goes. And then, like you said, Keon White is the other part about this. He was as good as Christian Gonzalez with the 2.5 sacks in Cincinnati. We've just spent a lot more time on Christian since then.
So they moved Keon White around a lot last week, and he was rushing from different spots. Now, Seattle's dealing with some injuries at right tackle. Should that entice them to just kind of keep him in that spot and let him attack the weak link, or do you move him around again and try rushing him from different spots?
I would move him around also because, and shout out Ben Baldwin, I think is at The Athletic, but is one of the best analytics follows you'll find anywhere on Twitter, and then also as a Seahawks fan. And he posted pass protection ratings, basically at center, guard, and tackle based on ESPN pass win rate analytics and PFF grade. So a little bit of both. Okay. Seattle's guards were terrible against Denver last week. And so for me, when I watch Keon White, long arm, Alex Kappa, straight into Joe Burrow's lap, and then grab Joe Burrow like a child with his other arm, I'd like to keep him inside, not only because they have weak guards, but that interior pressure, as you know, is really bothersome to pocket passers. And Geno Smith's a little bit mobile, but wants to stay in there, find a good platform. And I think Keon White probably staying on the right side, but I would be happy to move him inside and out because of how he performed last week. And I think that's where Seattle's going to be weakest, even with the injuries at right tackle.
Is this a bounce back game too for Josh Uche? Like you said, some pass protection issues. I felt like he had some rough moments week 1. That's another guy I think they're going to need to really maximize this defense to keep teams honest with Keon White. Is this a bounce back game for him?
I don't know. I think I need a break from Joshua Uche. Like I look at Uche and I wanted to make this work so many times, and we've gotten back together after breaking up. And I just want us to see other people and take some time apart and work on us, because I just can't quit the guy. And you see the talent. I had him down for 2 hurries against Cincinnati, and they weren't particularly impactful, but you just know there's more talent in there. And I just can't commit long-term to this person, because every time that I do, he burns me or disappears or ghosts me. So I'm sure, and I know Josh is a good guy, but the football player is maddeningly inconsistent and just an enigma. So I don't know what the hell is going to happen, Alex, on Sunday when it comes to Josh Uche. I do think, though, they could seriously benefit from him playing like the guy we saw 2 years ago, because obviously no Judon, no Barmore. If Keon White now gets extra attention in a way that he did not in Cincinnati, and Seattle goes, whoa, we need to stop 99, that opens up a lot of one-on-ones for him, and they need that rush because he's in that role. He was a third down, passing down specialist. That's what he's paid to do.
Right. And that's why even though he had some moments against Cincinnati, that's why I kind of looked at that as a down performance from him. Back-to-back third downs. One, he loses contain, allows Joe Burrow to roll out of the pocket and complete a first down pass. Then he jumps off sides on the next third down. And that's just, for a guy that's got to make his money on third downs, you can't be making mistakes in those spots. Those are the spots where you're making your money. And for a guy that bet on himself, that's a spot where you got to show up.
Supposedly.
Supposedly.
For a guy who made $3 million, and we now know and call it Taxachusetts, like to give up potentially double that elsewhere in other states and markets where you could have kept all of it with no income tax. Suppose that there's just that report did not pass the smell test. But I'm taking my time away from Josh Uche, the player, and I hope when we come back together, he's worked on himself and we're both better for it.
It's fair enough. I get he's a really tough player to get a read on because you have those 11 games at the end of the 2022 season, where it's unbelievable. I think it's like 70% of his career sacks came in those 11 games. And if he could do that consistently, you really have something there, but it hasn't been there in his career. Big picture with the Patriots defense. The big thing with Belichick, and I think Bill Belichick will probably be more of a talking point in terms of his absence, will be more of a talking point this week than last week because game plan defense, right? It was different every week. They approached everything different under the umbrella of their scheme. They approached everything different every week. Geno Smith, very different quarterback than Joe Burrow, physically and mentally. He's a little more mobile. He's a little more experienced. Burrow was coming off that wrist injury, which I think you saw as a factor in that game, whereas Geno Smith is a guy who, ever since he got to Seattle, has played with a ton of confidence. You really haven't seen that waver. Is this, in some ways, even though I think Burrow's a tremendous quarterback, is this in some ways more of a test for the coaching staff because you have a guy that's going to be tougher to fool and maybe tougher to knock off his game under center? Do you see them adjusting in that way?
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's a lot of variables here, right? Because it is week 2. He's learning a new offense. You mentioned the pass protection issues that they're likely to have a right tackle and right guard. So even if he knows what's going on, you still have to execute. And some teams just have bad openers. Ask the Bengals. They do this all the time. So it might not be the Patriots' day execution-wise, and we'll kill the coaches through that, but they might have a great plan for Geno Smith. We just don't know. It's really hard to get a read on this. I will give you 2 things on this, though, because I had a really good conversation with Jonathan Jones, both about the offense that they're now running and then a part of their defense that I have a story coming out tomorrow. I don't know when this is up. It'll be Thursday morning in the Herald. And online, obviously. Number one, this offense that they're running with new offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb has no ties to anything historically. And it's really a piece of this offense. There's a little bit of Miami. You've got a little bit of old school Shanahan stuff, the motions, the shifts. They motioned an 80% of their snaps against Denver, one of the highest figures in the league. It's all to kind of confuse you in a way that defenses rotate safeties in disguise, but they're doing it on offense. So there's a lot to be learned here with so little tape on this new offense that will be a test for the coaches, to your point. Number 2 is, over the offseason, the Patriots installed a blitz package, a pressure package that Mike Macdonald, last year the Ravens defensive coordinator, now Seattle's head coach, used in Baltimore to lead and coach the league's best defense. And not only last year, but 3 top 10 finishes in the last 4 years in points allowed. This is partly Drew Wilkins, but this is stuff that, as Jonathan Jones told me, A, is legitimately new. B, Belichick never would have done. And C, might be something the Seahawks are naturally more familiar with because, again, Mike Macdonald is the author of this pressure package that they have yet to really fully introduce, but is in the playbook. This is brand new. So I'm excited to see that because I got a little tease and taste talking to guys around the locker room like, oh, this is different with Covington. Now I know that's the reason why, but they didn't blitz a whole lot in Cincinnati. So we'll see what that looks like against the guy who authored this package that helped build the best defense in football last year.
Do you think that's something that, and I think so based on what you said, that we see more of this week?
I think so because the way they talk about it is like, this is basically a defense's version of an explosive play. Like you call your shot plays, right? We want to make something happen right now.
Right.
They believe in these calls so much. It's not automatic sack, it's not automatic pressure, but this is your best stuff. And they didn't use it a whole lot in Cincinnati because they didn't need to. They sat back and played cover 2 almost half the game. We're like, yeah, this is cool. This works. So it would be hard to show less because they basically did none of this stuff against the Bengals.
While they're in coverage too, and I do just want to mention Kenneth Walker because
Yeah.
everybody, Gerard Mayo, Devon Godshire, everybody was raving about him today, the running back for Seattle. I think he's a good player. I agree with what Gerard Mayo said. I think he's an underrated player. There wasn't a ton to worry about from the Bengals run game last week. The Patriots, I think, kind of just let them take what they were going to get, and for the most part, were able to stop it without run committing too much. How much do you think he factors into the plan? And is he one of these guys? We knew under Bill mentions a guy like that in a press conference. This is somebody that they're kind of selling out to stop. Do you think Kenneth Walker gets that kind of attention this week?
I do, and I'll tell you this though. I think the Patriots know they have a good run defense. Gerard proclaimed that Monday on the other radio station. It just said we're always going to have a good run defense, right? Like you can count on the mail showing up tomorrow in your mailbox. I don't know if that's true because the Bengals did find some success running at Daniel Ekuale and Keon White, who both played 80 and then 73% of the snaps, which the Bengals only ran 51 plays, so it's not a ton. But the point is, I think there are soft spots for the Bengals to run at. And if they are successful, what that will do is bring probably a safety into the box. At which point then, number one, you have something where the Bengals couldn't force the Patriots out of that too high structure last week, and they limited and denied all explosive plays. But if they do that, that serves up one-on-one opportunities where I think Geno Smith will take those shots, even if Christian Gonzalez is there, at DK Metcalf, possibly a Tyler Lockett. And so that's the question to me. If you're watching at home, look at where the safeties are. If you see them off the screen and the Patriots are stopping the run, they're probably going to win this game. If you see someone creeping down or having to creep down more often and often and often, A, there's going to be a big play action play from Seattle upcoming soon thereafter. And B, that means they think Kenneth Walker is probably, as you said, the key to this game. So that safety, that location, are they on one high or are they on two high? I think it's going to be a really, really big tell for how this game starts and how this game goes.
All right, as we wrap it up here, Andrew, let me ask you this. I know you just kind of gave 1 point, but if the Patriots do win this game, we all come back on Monday saying the Patriots won the game because blank. What would be the biggest reason the Patriots won the game?
Well, can I just sit and sink into this world where on a Monday, the 2024 Patriots are 2-0? Like I was printing fictitious shirts before the season on my podcast saying like, hey, we tried. This will take a while. All this stuff we heard from Gerard, like it's about progress. It's not about wins. And they might be one of the few undefeated teams left in football because they're only 3.5-point underdogs at home. Granted, not great, but there is a path for them to win. They will.
And let's not forget, by the way, then you have a Jets team that really did not look good on Monday night. So not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but
I'm still wrapping my head around 2-0. I cannot get to 3-0, though I might because, as you said, it's a quick turnaround. Also, God knows what Aaron Rodgers will say if that drops the Jets to 0-3 and how it'll be everyone else's fault. Anyway, they will win if they do not turn the ball over again and if they keep Seattle to, I would say, 5 or fewer explosive plays. The Patriots will win this game if those two things happen. You could also, just to knock myself for a second, say that for any game, but it's especially true of a team that's built only really to run the ball and play defense.
Well, it kind of feels like that's who they are, right? And I mean, the days of them being able to throw the ball 50 times one week, run it 50 times the next week, blitz heavy 1 week, cover 4 heavy the next week, like that's just not who they are anymore. And it's hard for any team to be that. They just had such excessive levels of talent on both the roster and the coaching staff that they do kind of have an identity they need to stick to. And I know they've talked about being a game plan team and they still can be to an extent, but there is sort of a formula I feel like that they have to follow to be competitive in a lot of these games.
Yeah, your limits, your ceiling is what your talent level is. I don't care if you're doing a podcast, right. I don't care if you're running a football team, a business, whatever it is. And their talent level says your ceiling is just that, a ball control offense, an excellent versatile defense, and a special teams it's going to need to provide meaningful edges like they did in Cincinnati to win football games. That's what it is. They're one of the least talented teams in the league. It doesn't mean you have to be one of the worst. You just have to play a certain way because that's what you're working with. Those are your tools available. So, yeah, there's a formula. And Gerard cannot make up his mind about this running thing. Like, we're always. He paused and emphasized, we're always going to be a run-first offense. I asked him about that quote 20 minutes later, and as well, we'll always be a game plan offense. And like, oh, if you stop the run, then we'll throw it. This is nothing that's revelatory, but it's being treated as such. So I would just say, look, we're going to game plan every week like every team does. And it means probably running more than most teams because that's how we're built. And we all get it. We all see it. But the vacillation has been just a little weird the last, 5 days?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's been like that with a lot of. We did that with the quarterback competition. We did it with a lot.
Yeah.
I almost feel like it's the counter to Belichick, where Bill would say nothing, so we knew nothing. Gerard Mayo puts every option on the table, and by doing that, we still don't. If
We
everything's
flood
an
the
option,
zone.
nothing's
Yeah.
an option. So
Yeah.
flooding the zone is a great way to put it by Gerard Mayo. He is Andrew Callahan. You can read him on the Boston Herald and on BostonHerald.com. You can also check out the Pat's Interference podcast on CLNS Media, and you can hear him on the Sports Hub on Tuesday mornings with Toucher and Hardy. Andrew, you want to plug? I know you said I'm going to release this Wednesday night, so I know you said you have some things coming Thursday. If you want to just kind of let people know what's coming.
Yeah, I walked around the locker room today, asked guys about the intel that I got about this pressure package. This is a Patriots defense that now has a Ravens flavor to it. What does that mean? What does it look like? How is it going to show up? How did it happen? That's all in the story on Thursday. You and I both are doing now, as you told me last week, dueling Friday 5 things kind of columns too, to look for that after you read Alex's, and then a big Sunday Notes plus a Friday episode of my podcast with ESPN's Bill Barnwell. So lots of good stuff coming. You can find it all on Twitter.
Check that out. Andrew, thanks for joining us. For more Sports Hub Patriots content, 985thesportshub.com, like Andrew mentioned. So yours is, what was it, Friday 5.
Friday 5.
The Friday 5 on Fridays. I have 5 things that will be coming out. Your name's better. I'll admit that, hand up. I honestly typed in 5 things as like a placeholder, and I was like, this sounds kind of cool. Maybe I'll stick with it. 5 things, 985thesportshub.com. You can get more Patriots audio wherever you get your podcasts, the Sports Hub Patriots audio feed, and on the Sports Hub YouTube channel. So for Andrew Callahan, I'm Alex Barth. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll talk to you after the game on Monday.